There's not a place you can stand on the trail and be out of sight of a grave.
I said, well, don't unhook me. I said, just tip me back up and let me go. And he really got a kick out of that.
Someday this journey will be remembered as our
legacy west.
Walking these sandhills, we sense we're on hallowed ground. The ruts made by the early expeditions are indelibly etched upon the landscape. And below us to the south lies the unmarked grave of a tiny pioneer child. Our imaginations bring to our ears the clatter of the wagons, the neighing of the horses, the cries and commands of the wagon masters, the calls of the teamsters, the laughter and songs of the children. The pathway, like the intermittent lonely graves, is unmarked. They knew it led westward toward the sunset. Their silent hopes seemed to whisper to us over the vastness of the prairie, follow the river, keep climbing the sandy hills of western Nebraska. Pray that the food and water supplies last. Pray that the wind dies. Pray that the baby lives.
Okay, wagons ho!
Yeah! We've been jamming to the music! Right on, baby! Yes! Come on, girls! Come on! Woo! Give me an A! Hey! Give me an A!
All we did was dream the last hour of a horse trough.
Yeah, the whole way is horse trough! Horse trough! Horse trough!
Bugles, water, starbursts, raincoats, gloves, fruits, oranges, apples, and bananas. We've got a shawl, ponchos, backpacks.
Whoa, we're boiling over. We need to be turned down. Or removed immediately.
As settlers crossed this great frontier, their reasons for pioneering differed. Sometimes it was a land rush, or perhaps a gold rush. Sometimes it was a desire to conquer the unknown or settle in some beautiful country. But to the Mormons, the motivation for leaving the settled states was religious. They were going to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. They would build a temple in the tops of those distant hills. They would establish their awaited Zion.
One of the things that I love about the trail is the unity. And of course there are hard days. There are days when people are hurting and a little bit crabby. But for the most part, there's such a feeling of love and acceptance and a willingness to help out. Everyone wants to help. I feel like I'm part of a moving Zion. And I love that.
Those pioneers sang a song in some faith about finding a place in the West which God for them would prepare, where none would hurt or make afraid. Well, 150 years ago, that was a hope. Now, we sing it as a realization. We call back to those people over those generations and say, it really worked. God did bless us. It is a story of faith, and faith realized.
The depth of the commitment of the pioneers, led by Brigham Young, is overwhelming, and I think nobody will be able to say that better than those who have come all the way, and perhaps even those who have just come from winter quarters to the Salt Lake Valley.
We have a wagon train like this with leaders from our church, the Mormon church, as well as wagon masters who are of other faiths, Catholics or whoever. It's very interesting. I think we finally get to the place we recognize more and more that we're really all in this together anyway. We're really part of a family, brothers and sisters, regardless.
They joined the Mormon church, and no matter what afflictions beset them, no matter what the weather was, no matter what the persecutions became, they stayed true to the faith. And I think it's a great legacy to leave for us today.
I think people who couldn't do what they did didn't get this far. There was obviously a winnowing and the challenges of faith and life and devotion then. I think people of, I don't mean just my family, I mean any of the people. I think people of lesser conviction and lesser substance probably didn't get this far.
I'm walking with Zion, and yeah, and we're on our way to Zion too. I guess Zion is wherever you are, you know. Zion it's in your heart.
As they traveled westward with such a perspective, they looked upon their trials as a process of temporal testing, with great spiritual rewards for their faithfulness and perseverance. This frame of mind didn't lessen the frequent pain of losing loved ones along the trail, but there was a sense of the eternal consequences of their efforts and the hope of an eternal world to come.
We've gathered here at this special spot to remember all those children who were buried along this trail. And we're grateful to be here together to dedicate or rededicate this gravesite.
Along the trail, on property now owned by Joe Reyes, lies the unmarked grave of a pioneer child. Stu Coker, one of the older residents of the area, remembers the local tradition surrounding the burial near the trail's edge.
And this little baby was about 1.5 years old and died, and they buried him there and put just a cedar post where the grave was. And then in years later, when that cedar post was chopped off and burned and rotted, then they put a little fence around it.
The graves were marked with maybe a stick with a cross and the person's name on it. Well, over the years, all this plains country, the grass country, was burned off every 2 or 3 years to get rid of the dead grass and give better grass for the buffaloes. So these wooden markers did not survive.
It's an honor to me to have them old people taken care of that died years ago, or that little baby. I don't care whether it's 20 years ago. He was a soul and a human being, and he died, and he's entitled to a marker, just like if I'd lose one of my kids today or tomorrow. You know, that's the way I feel about it.
I think I can imagine at least a little bit of the pain of what it must have been like for the parents of this child to have the child die and to dig a grave and lay the child in the grave and then move on the next day.
People focus on the tragedies and they feel sorry for these people, but they didn't feel sorry for themselves. They were doing it because they wanted to, and they were trying to make the most of it. They were very resourceful people. We should admire them more for their resourcefulness than for their ability to withstand tragedy.
All is well, all is well. At this time, Father, we remember all of those children, thousands of children buried along this trail, and the grief of their parents and their faith that carried them onwards.
I just thought that if I was a mom and I lost my daughter or my son, I don't think I could handle it. A lot of them are just women who didn't even have their husbands with them. And they gave up so much, and I feel so bad every time I complain because I've never had to give up anything for the church or my testimony. There's not a place you can stand on the trail and be out of sight of a grave. It's just, I guess I've been on it long enough that it's just hit me today. How many were left? How many didn't make it?
Before our journey's through, happy day, all is well.
It's been an emotional day for my family. We've apparently lost a lot of our family in this valley when they came across 150 years ago. And I'm looking at these small children just putting their hands on that rock, and I can sense the spirit of this place a little bit more by realizing that there really were children that came through believing in their parents, believing in the prophet, and made it to the Salt Lake Valley, and some didn't.
I'm walking to represent my great-great-grandmother who buried her infant and toddler on the trail. And my children are about the same age as hers. And I feel today that they were probably here with us. I think there are angels among us as we walk.
Reminded me of my 3. And I'm glad that he dedicated it to all of the 6,000 who died along the way.
Oh, how we'll make this chorus swell. All is well. All is
Back in 1847, most of the wagons which crossed the plains were pulled by oxen. Despite their strength, they were slow travelers and required an immense amount of feed and water. It's interesting and maybe even a bit humorous to imagine the challenge it must have been for many an immigrant just arriving in America to be thrust into the situation of having to cross the plains, speaking little or no English, and having to learn to drive a team of oxen and communicate with a wagon master. The universal oxen language, G and Ha, certainly came in handy in those times. The sandhills of western Nebraska proved to be a major obstacle for the wagon trains. At times, the sand extended to the banks of the river, requiring the company to either ford the river or climb the hills. Weighing the advantages against the dangers, the vanguard expedition of 1847 ultimately chose to climb the hills. The ruts of their wagon wheels are still visible, even to this day.
Well, the whole area is underlined by the Ogallala Formation, and that's a sandstone, and that's what develops the sand hills. The erosion of that sand is what develops the sand hills, and it's the biggest sand dune area in the Western Hemisphere.
This will be the event of the day here today. You might even see a wagon turn over, because if they start coming over through there and lock the brakes up too soon, that wagon goes sideways and that team's pulling, then this goes.
A string of wagons over the horizon is just as impressive now as it was 150 years ago. Leaving Hershey, Nebraska, the wagon train was to leave the usual well-marked roads, venture out into the open prairie, and climb the famed sandhills near the Platte River. Sensing an opportunity to broadcast this historic scene, national press gathered to pursue the story. But staging the climbing and descent of the sandhill ruts was a considerable task. The press was interested in having the effort appear as authentic as possible. But more importantly, the wagon masters were intent upon avoiding any unnecessary dangers.
I would bet money, marbles, or chalk that every other team out here will not pull that hill. You've got nothing but sand. I've been born and raised on this stuff all my life. The minute about 2 or 3 wagons goes in, you're going to be going down about like this in sand.
We're not trying to challenge you, and I know what that is. There's a lot of you say, you just think I can't, I'll do it, just show you I can, but let's use some common sense.
There's a lot of personalities. You know, the people out on this trail are strong-willed people or they wouldn't be here. And sometimes to get all the strong wills bent so they follow the path you want them to follow is challenging.
I got flesh and blood in me that crossed that hill right there. You bet. I got blood in my veins that crossed that hill.
Yes, sir. This is going right up the hill in the canyon with our friends and the hand carts.
We're going to tackle this hill with enthusiasm and right over the top, something like Iwo Jima style.
And we're going all the way. I'm biking, of course.
Even this hill?
Yep.
We're just walking. We'll just do what we can. It's gonna be fine.
Pioneers did the same thing.
Yeah.
They can do it.
Why not?
On the way down the hill, Wagon Master Ben Kern failed to negotiate one of the deeper ruts. Fortunately, no one was hurt.
You know, it didn't hurt my wagon, and what I was thankful for is my team didn't run off. You know, a lot of times you upset a wagon while it spooks your team, and of course I had my line. I kept hold of my lines, and Danny Van Fleet, he came up and he said, well, "Give me your lines and we'll unhook you." And I said, "Well, don't unhook me." I said, "Just tip me back up and let me go." And he really got a kick out of that.
That was authentic.
Rounding around, showing off.
And it was just like a slow motion dream, and we just went down and hit very softly in the sand.
Well, it was kind of exciting there. We just had a little ball that nobody else had the experience of doing, and that was rolling over in the wagon, and no one got hurt, so that was the nicest thing about it.
Just push. You can push a little more. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need to hold it back quite as much. That was wonderful, though. Okay.
Yeah. Come on, living there, boys.
Spirit out there is just incredible. I got some flowers to press. A little sand to put in a vial. It was great.
During the expeditions to Utah, it was not uncommon for children to travel alone. In 1866, at 10 years of age, B.H. Roberts crossed the plains with his older sister. Through his own innocent folly, the 3-month trek would be made without shoes or coat. From his own accounts, he records having gone ahead to watch the train pass, and in total exhaustion fell asleep along the side of the river.
I slept on, and not all the shouting of the teamsters and the immigrants, nor the lunging of the wagons into the river awoke me. In fact, when I did awake, the last wagon of the train was just pulling up the opposite bank of the river. Shouting at the top of my voice and rushing down to where the road met the river, I attracted the attention of Captain Chipman, who sat upon his horse on the opposite bank. The captain shouted to know if I could swim, and was answered in the affirmative. I was directed to "Come on then." With this, my old clogs from England were shuffled off blistered feet and left on the sandbar. Slipping off my coat, only shirt and barn door trousers left, I plunged through one stream after another between the sandbars until I came to the main stream. Without hesitation, I plunged into this last stream to be carried down very rapidly. Apparently, Captain Chipman felt uneasy and drove his horse, well practiced, into the stream and came swimming to where I was struggling for the further shore. The captain slipped his foot from the stirrup and bade me take hold of it, and the horse swam down until a suitable landing place was reached, and all three of us came up from the river together. The captain held in his hand a light horsewhip, and felt it evidently not unjust to give several sharp cuts across my pants, which stung sharply, but no cry was uttered, and I felt I was well out of a bad scrape.
Brigham Henry Roberts would walk barefoot to the valleys of Utah. His mother, who had gone before him 4 years earlier and awaited his arrival in Salt Lake City, would find him unrecognizable.
Countless in numbers almost were those silent witnesses of death by the way. The mounds were to be seen in all imaginable places. Each day we passed them, singly or in groups, and sometimes, nay often, one of our own company was left behind to swell the number. By the banks of streams, on grassy hillocks, in the sands beneath the groves of trees, or among piles of rock, the graves were dug.
There's an unknown grave in a lonely spot, and the form that it covers will ne'er be forgot. There the heaven tree spreads and the tall locusts wave, their snow-white flowers o'er the unknown grave, over the unknown. And near by its side does the wild rabbit tread, and over its bosom the white thistle spread, as if placed there in kindness to God.